2025 is booked and busy with major event movies, so it was no easy task picking just 10 of them for my list of the most anticipated movies of the year. Good or bad? That's right. My list is about movies that people are talking about. And these days, sometimes the talk's not so good. You know, people aren't sure which way some people are. There's an argument as to which way the movie is going to break. They say there's no such thing as bad publicity, but we're going to find out this year. So I'll be curious to see did you have an easier time picking out just 10 movies? Some of you feel the 2025 slate is a little weak. So I'll be curious to see what your list of the top 10 most anticipated movies of 2025 looks like. Be sure to share them down below. All right, so number 10, Michael. I didn't include this in my box office preview because it's not from one of the top 5 studios, but still, I think this movie, and many of you asked about it, which just goes to show people are talking about it. I think it deserves to be on this list. After Freddie Mercury, Elvis, and now Bob Dylan, next up is Mr. Michael Jackson. Clearly, one of the keys to success with these types of movies is a killer song list. And ain't no one got a better song list than Michael. Like Elvis, he's even gotten the Cirque du Soleil treatment. I didn't see the Elvis Cirque du Soleil show, although I have the soundtrack, which is pretty amazing. But I did see the Michael Jackson show, which was, I must tell you, absolutely incredible. I'll never forget seeing that. I wish it was still available to see. And producer Graham King, who's behind this movie, was also behind Bohemian Rhapsody. But on the flip side, while Antoine Fuqua and John Logan are certainly big names when it comes to directors and writers, neither of them really has any experience. I mean, that's being generous with musicals. So what a time to learn how to make a musical, right? Like, shouldn't you have learned on something else? This is the big leagues. The Jackson family is heavily involved here, so much so that Michael Jackson's own nephew, Jafar, is portraying him. So the big question that hovers over this film is obviously, how will it handle the controversy? So many questions surround Michael to this day. There's a rumor, I mean, this photo is from, like Michael's heyday, the early part of his heyday, but from his heyday. But there's a rumor that the movie is largely going to focus on Michael Jackson's early years, the less controversial times. Well, for Michael, Jackson's father, of course, is also very controversial and, will be portrayed in this film. But also, the Jacksons weren't a big part of Michael's controversial years, so maybe that's, how they can make this movie. Stick to the part they know, which isn't as, tricky. Because everybody agrees that Michael Jackson's father had his problems. But yet at the same time, if you leave out the potentially problematic years for Michael, you're leaving out some of his biggest hits. It's definitely going to be a balancing act, and a difficult one at that. But if this film can pull it off, it will be the biggest of them all, just like Michael. All right, then, number 9, Thunderbolts. This is Marvel's big movie of the year, or at least it's supposed to be, because this is the one that got the release date that kicks off the summer movie season. Only problem is, Marvel has 2 summer movies this year because Deadpool and Wolverine was supposed to be a summer kickoff movie. Because of the strikes got delayed, created a hot new release date. In fact, Marvel is gambling it might be the new summer release date, and that's releasing in, at the same time as Comic-Con, which had always been considered a hindrance up until Deadpool and Wolverine. So yes, you've got Fantastic Four taking over that other date at the end of the summer, and Fantastic Four is totally new to the MCU, and that makes them very hard to compete with. Whereas of course the Thunderbolts, these are characters we've seen before, well, for the most part. Also, how does Thunderbolts deal with being a Marvel Suicide Squad ripoff made up of a cast of characters drawn mostly from Disney Plus and not as successful films? Isn't that a large part of what hurt the Marvels? Also, like with Secret Invasion, Dark Avengers, which many of us think this might be, that spun out of Secret Invasion. Kevin Feige changes a lot. He can change a lot with these famous comic book storylines, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I think when it doesn't work, it's because the story has been greatly diminished from the comics, the impact of it. And hey, maybe Thunderbolts, though it isn't Dark Avengers, maybe it really is just a Thunderbolts movie. But if it's just a Thunderbolts movie with this cast, is it really a theatrical property? Plus, we'll find out how many teams the MCU can support after just the Avengers. So you have the Avengers, now you've got the Thunderbolts. Feige it's said that he wants to bring in Young Avengers and maybe even more teams. That's a lot of teams. But everyone loves Florence Pugh's Yelena and Sebastian Stan's Bucky. Plus, beef was so good with that creative team reassembled here behind the scenes. Poor Stephen Yeun, he was almost a part of this as well. The odds are very much in the movie's favor of being good because beef was just so incredible. Can Marvel also, though, keep Thunderbolts' ace up its sleeve? Should they? Or are they denying themselves the major selling point of the film? I guess it depends how much the character actually ends up being in the film once you see it. As of right now, the movie, though, seems a little small, which I think is what's having trouble competing. As some of you have said, Marvel has 3 movies, not in the span of a year, but in 6 months almost. Yes, it is 6 months because they don't have a January movie. That's very hard to do. And so far, Thunderbolts is struggling. But I think it looks fun. And, we'll see if moviegoers check this one out in theaters. It does still kick off the summer movie season, but they could also end up waiting for Disney+. We'll see. All right, number 8, 28 years later. So there's before this trailer dropped and after the trailer dropped. Because the trailer for 28 years later was so inventive and so effective, it just came out of nowhere, that it instantly upgraded the sequel in the eyes of everyone. Everyone was suddenly like, wow, there's a movie to watch. Can Danny Boyle and Alex Garland deliver a commercial hit? Were they even behind that trailer? That could very much have been the marketing team. And do they have to deliver a commercial hit? Nosferatu did a lot for art house horror, although it was Robert Eggers' most commercial film to date. And perhaps Nosferatu will have helped set the stage for 28 years later. That would be a wonderful trend. Aaron Taylor Johnson, though, right after Craven, Sony loves this guy. That's not ideal timing, but Jodie Comer and Ralph Fiennes should help. Plus, everyone's excited to see what Cillian Murphy's cameo is after this clever misdirect. Can Sony turn this into an ongoing franchise? 28 years later, The Bone Temple, with Aaron Taylor Johnson and Cillian Murphy again, this time for the Marvel's Nia DaCosta directing, is already set for just 1 year later in 2026. All right, number 7, Snow White. That's right. My first draft of this list had Captain America 4 here, but I didn't want to put all 3 Marvel movies on here. I just didn't think that was fair. Plus, while no one's saying very much good things about Snow White, there's certainly a lot more conversation around Snow White than there is Captain America 4. So is this another Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin? Or maybe it's a Little Mermaid or Cinderella, like in the mid-range. Or maybe it's going to be a flop like Mulan. Snow White is a tough story to adapt, even under the best of circumstances. And these circumstances aren't good. They're, in fact, quite bad. First, Peter Dinklage kept the movie from using real actors to portray the dwarves, forcing Disney to use these CGI monstrosities. And while Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler look amazing in the film, wow, they sure can get themselves in trouble on social media and in interviews. And are Gal Gadot's line readings truly awful or campy fun? I don't think audiences have totally decided yet. Live-action adaptations are supposed to add more depth to the original animated films. And while some additions seem clever, like the Evil Queen really being, decked out in jewels, do they come from the Seven Dwarfs' mind? That's an interesting idea. Making Snow White an activist, though, and cutting her most famous song, Someday My Prince Will Come, maybe less of a good idea. Plus, oddly, from the second trailer, it seemed there were 2 problems from the second trailer. One is that the movie seemed to have like a split personality. At some points, when it's in the magical forest, it's absolutely stunning. A Thomas Kinkade painting brought to life. But other times, flat and dull. Now, that might be an artistic choice. The Queen's evil kingdom is devoid of life. But yet, I have to look at it for half the movie. I mean, maybe it might make sense from a filmmaking perspective, but not from I have to watch this perspective. Also, the movie seems oddly repetitive of Universal's own adaptation of Snow White back in 2012. That movie didn't exactly knock it out of the park, although it did do well enough to get a sequel. But they didn't make a third. Snow White is the one that started it all, with a popular attraction in Orlando, and it's part of Disney's coveted princess line. Although Snow White usually not the princess of choice. But it would be embarrassing if this flopped. Yet it seems like Disney is serving this movie up to the toxic channels and social media accounts that have done so very well off of Disney hate. Disney, you're supposed to be moving away from this kind of stuff, not wading deeper in. I mean, it does seem like a throwback to what Bob Iger's been trying to get away from. They did delay this movie, but I don't know if you can delay it enough. I don't even know if they should have a press tour. But how would you handle the release of this film? They hid that trailer. Remember they released the trailer in front of Wicked and they didn't put it online? It was in front of it was in front of Wicked. And they didn't put it online for like over a week because, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Number 6, How to Train Your Dragon. And yes, here comes Universal as they get into the live-action adaptation space, reworking DreamWorks' popular How to Train Your Dragon in live action. And it seems Universal can strong-arm as good as the mouse because Dean DeBlois says, he's been in charge of the animated movies and stuff. He said they told him they were going to make this live-action adaptation with or without him. So he got on board. That's how they got Pixar to agree to make Toy Story 2. They said they were going to make it with or without them. Disney did. All right, much like Halle Bailey, though, Nico Parker has been targeted by online, trolls for taking over the role of Astrid, even though America Ferrera voiced the original character in animation. Plus, when did Hiccup go from nerdy to popular kid pretending to be nerdy, right? Mason Thames is a long way from Jay Baruchel, but I guess that's live action for you. They're like, his hair's combed funny. You're like, are you kidding me? He just looks like he had a hat on. As soon as a gust of wind hits him, he'll be just fine. How to Train Your Dragon, though, is super popular. Not just the movies, it has the series, and of course, it's a big part of the upcoming Epic Universe theme park in Orlando. Thankfully, Gerard Butler takes on Stoic the Vast in live action, just as he did in animation, and he looks amazing. I think that will really work to help anchor this transition. Also, Toothless looks pretty darn good as well. If they can deliver the heart and the flying sequences from the animated movie, I think they could have a real winner here. Plus, just like the animated movies, this live action one will also be available in 3D and in IMAX. This franchise could become even bigger than it already is for Universal. And expect the anti-Disney crowd to get behind this in a big way. That was one of the things that helped, I think, Super Mario Brothers, and I think it could help this movie. All right, now we've reached the top 5, the cream of the crop, the VIP section of a top 10. Number 5, these were tough choices. Jurassic World Rebirth. Yes, the franchise that everyone loves to hate, yet then go pay to see. It's like the opposite of DC. It's so funny. All right, yes. After a difficult first trilogy, the first movie was amazing, but then it just went downhill from there, although I kind of like Jurassic World Park 3. But anyway, the second trilogy delivered $3 billion movies. 3 of them! The dinosaurs helped, of course, but how much was Mr. Chris Pratt? He also gets a lot of hate, yet he consistently delivers at the box office. David Cope is returning to script, and sure, while he wrote the first one, it's important to remember he also wrote Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. So Gareth Edwards is directing after creative differences with David Leitch. I think David Leitch maybe couldn't deliver it fast enough. Universal delivered this very quickly. They were like, let's make another Jurassic movie for next year. And everyone was like, that's nuts. But yet they did it. And I think Gareth Edwards was a big part of that and his ability to work fast and cheap. But remember the triangle of what you can deliver. It's in terms of quality, speed, and money. You can't have all 3. You usually only get 2. So Gareth Edwards might have left out the quality part of this equation. All right, so Edwards makes movies, as I said, that look great, but cost very little, and he can make them very quickly. But to his name, while he's worked in some big franchises, he only really has one big hit, which everyone liked, and that's Rogue One. But that needed a huge overhaul from Tony Gilroy. So how can he deliver a good movie here without Tony Gilroy coming to save the day yet again? Scarlett Johansson also has something to prove, although I find it endearing that she's such a big fan of the franchise personally that she just has wanted to be in a Jurassic movie for quite some time. Sure, she's an original Avenger, but she has struggled not only to lead a movie outside of Marvel, but even within Marvel. Black Widow, that didn't do great. Was that totally due to the pandemic? I feel bad, Scarlett, but I think it might have partially been the character and your portrayal of it. Although we'll see how Yelena fares as Black Widow over in Thunderbolts. But also, the Jurassic movies have never had a female lead before. They've had major female characters, but not a female lead, nor a diverse cast. But here we go. Mahershala Ali, he couldn't wait on Blade any longer. I'm glad he got something this good as the follow-up. And Jonathan Bailey rounds out the cast, along with Manuel Garcia Rufo. So there's no Chris Pratt, though. There's no Chris Pratt replacement, like, say, Glenn Powell, who Universal wanted. Glenn Powell revealed that he turned this movie down. That's risky, I think, for not just the franchise, but for Powell himself. I think this movie could have really used him. But you know what? It's dinosaurs, right? Coming off of a very successful trilogy. So let's see what that trailer looks like. Does Gareth Edwards save a lot of money by not showing us a lot of dinosaurs? I think that would be a huge mistake. All right, number 4, Wicked for Good. It was a risky move splitting Wicked into 2 movies, especially with the most famous songs in the first half. Although some of you vouch for the songs in the second half, so we'll see. Also, like Barbie, Wicked caught a lot of haters off guard, but for the sequel, they'll be ready. I'm very nervous about that. And speaking of haters, the Golden Globes sure dissed Wicked. If Wicked ends awards season basically empty-handed, I think that would cast a shadow over the second film. Although it just scored 10 Oscar noms, so let's see what happens! And the second half has even more to do with The Wizard of Oz, which should hopefully win over even more casual moviegoers to this franchise. Also, Stephen Schwartz is writing 2 new songs for the second half, one for Elphaba and one for Glinda, which will not only excite fans, but will qualify for Best Original Song at next year's Oscars. This year, none of the songs qualify because they're not original songs for film. They were originally written for Broadway. Also, can Wicked Mania be repeated? You know, we weren't sure that Barbie Mania could be repeated, and Wicked did it to a little bit of a smaller degree, but, you know, so big. So don't count out this massive sequel just yet, which has a massive and dedicated fan base that's fresh, new, and positive, unlike so many other fan bases these days. They haven't been corrupted just yet. They're still fresh-faced and new. I mean, I saw Wicked 3 times, twice paying for it. I saw it at a press screening, and then I saw it 2 more times in theaters. And I'm not a massive Wicked fan. How many times did you see Wicked in theaters? They say the second film is a little more serious, though. But I'm very excited. I'm a little nervous. I hope it doesn't get Barbied in many ways, but I'm very excited. Number 3, Fantastic Four. It's pretty amazing that Marvel can excite audiences about the 3rd incarnation of a superhero team that has never, while it's Marvel Comics' first family officially, they've never really been that popular. Like in any medium, the Fantastic Four have never been really that popular. But the idea of borrowing from The Incredibles in live action is like, although to be fair, The Incredibles borrowed very heavily from the Fantastic Four, so it's it works out. But that's a pretty cool idea. Peyton Reed, poor Peyton Reed, it was his idea. But after 3 bombs, the last one, the biggest bomb of all, that seriously derailed the MCU and happened just when he was saying, hey, could I direct Fantastic Four? And Kevin Feige was like, no. WandaVision's Matt Shakman got the gig, although he's not that proven in the movie space either. The movie has 6 writers that we know of. That's never a good sign. And it couldn't sign any major stars to the film. Oh, but gosh darn it, if we still aren't excited about this movie, that's amazing. I think casting some fan favorites has helped, although we're still not sold on Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm. And I like Joseph Quinn, but he ain't Johnny Storm. There's some cool concept art. That's been a lot of fun. And a pretty nifty score from Michael Giacchino, who, by the way, also scores The Incredibles. Pixar, though, is working on The Incredibles 3. Can these 2 super families coexist? Also, rumor has it that this is the movie that will first feature Robert Downey Jr.'s Doom. Well, will that be the cherry on this sundae or the fly in the soup? We'll have to see how audiences react. I will say also that video game Marvel Rivals, which I recently covered in a separate video, has been doing a lot to hype up the Fantastic Four, although a very different take on the characters. I don't know if that might end up being a problem. It's very modern. But Reed and Sue are making everyone oh so thirsty, and so I wonder if Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby can be mother and father as well. But it's in a different way. I'm not sure. They might mother and father, but I don't think the Marvel Rivals FF are mothering and fathering. As I said, I think that's more about making everybody so thirsty. By the way, a key part of what makes The Incredibles so great is the inventive action sequences, particularly with Elastigirl, aka Mrs. Incredible. Let's see if Shackman and the second unit team, which handles all the action sequences apparently, if they can be as clever as Brad Bird has been in dreaming up action sequences for the Fantastic Four. I think it would be hard. It's so difficult to the point that I'd be like, we're all on the same team. Do you want to help me out, Brad Bird? And Brad Bird will say, no, I'm making The Incredibles 3. I'm saving my awesome sequences for myself. All right, runner-up, Superman. Love it or hate it. And you haven't even seen it yet. So many people have decided if they're going to love or hate this movie, and you haven't even seen it. But we all know for sure that there's a lot riding on it. Not just for Gunn. Peter Safran, he'll be fine. I mean, maybe the smartest thing he ever did was never really put his face on the DC Studios situation. He'll just go back to being a producer behind the scenes just like he is now. But there's a lot riding on this for Gunn. There's a lot riding on this for DC, but also for the new Warner Brothers leadership. This thing tanks, heads roll everywhere. Because, they can make excuses for Joker too. They're like, oh, we inherited that mess. But not really, to a degree. But, this would be really bad. Is it the beginning of a new era for DC or yet another Wonder Woman 1984 and Flash? Movies, I thought Wonder Woman 1984, I could see the problems with one. I could see the problems with both. But I enjoyed them. I particularly thought The Flash was fun. James Gunn liked The Flash. That should have scared the poop out of him when that did so poorly. He's the same cinematographer, which is why the movies have a little bit of a similar look. Zack Snyder and James Gunn, the two are more alike than they are different, down to having two very loyal fandoms that are currently at war. One is determined to prove that Warner Brothers should have let Snyder finish his vision, or at least give Henry Cavill a proper chance, while the other feels that DC is finally, has a bright new future ahead of it. And make no mistake, Superman will determine if Gunn's DC does have a real future. I mean, he's already filming Supergirl, of course, and there'll be other projects already underway, but this will either it'll set the tone. It'll, the mood, right? It's very important. But also, remember the last time that Warner Brothers lured away one of Marvel's top directors? Some of you seem to have forgotten. It was called Justice League, and it was a disaster. If Kevin Feige's willing to let somebody go, there's probably a pretty good reason. Feige and Gunn were a great combination, but Gunn on his own so far remains unproven. Not to his fan base. He has a very niche but potent fan base that love everything that he does, and I think kind of warp the viewership, is important, and I think the box office really settle things. So I think that Gunn's loyal fans will love whatever he does with Superman, but I think, we've yet to see Gunn on his own whether or not he can deliver a big-sized hit. But also, speaking of Marvel, James Gunn is borrowing so many elements from the MCU that it seems less like he's creating this new franchise and more like a mashup, this weird mashup of Marvel, Feige's Marvel and Zack Snyder's DC. Maybe that's a brilliant idea. It might end up being very smart. We'll see. That's right, though. Even under new management, DC is still a puzzling mess. But that doesn't mean they can't deliver a good movie. It's been a minute. But even, they have had their hits here and there, and this could be another one of them. The Superman trailer was a huge hit. Huge hit! Although the PR guy who orchestrated its drop and was behind Barbie becoming a mega hit just left the studio. Oh my God. But even if everyone doesn't pay to see this in theaters, they'll certainly be keeping an eye on it and seeing how it does. Although again, that's a big part of DC's problem for a while now. Everybody loves to talk about it. They don't actually pay to see it. All right, that leaves the biggest movie for 2025. I almost had it as Superman after how well that trailer did. But ultimately, I had to go with Avatar: Fire and Ash. That's right. We all doubted that James Cameron could deliver another mega hit like he did the first one. Well, Titanic too. But he did! He did it! I can't believe it. And what's more, with Way of Water, he even went over Avatar haters like myself. I loved Avatar 2. I'm all in. I think in large part because Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver came on to help Cameron with the script. They're my favorite screenwriting duo, particularly when it comes to sci-fi films. And I'm excited to say they're a big part of this next film as well. Now, it took over a decade to get Avatar 2. Now, between these next two segments, it'll have just been 3 years. That not only means no pent-up demand, but, and this is, I think, very important, no big jump in 3D technology. However, still, to this day, nobody can use 3D technology like James Cameron. which I think is a big part of what makes the Avatar movies do so well. They demand to be seen in theaters, and they really do transport you to another world. The water effects were incredible in Way of Water, and so while there isn't a big jump in 3D technology, what he's depicting will change dramatically as he switches over to fire. Oh, the water effects in that movie with now fire effects, that could be really incredible. I also think what's exciting about Avatar 3 is that we're getting a new clan. The Water Clan were very similar to the clan from the first movie, but the Fire Clan is going to be significantly different, and I think that will make a difference. Also, while in the past it was humans bad, Na'vi good, James Cameron says with this new entry, we'll see that the Na'vi are just as complex as humans. They're good and bad humans and Na'vi. And I think that's a very timely message with the current global political climate we find ourselves in, although I don't know if anybody wants to go to an Avatar movie for that. They're supposed to be an escape. Although Cameron's very good at the schmaltz. People love his messaging. Can Cameron deliver a $2 billion film a third time, or I guess technically a fourth? Titanic didn't make $2 billion, but I mean, that would be amazing. It would be amazing. I used to say, never bet against Jimmy C, but then he produced that Terminator movie, and that was awful. But, he just produced it. He didn't direct it, but still, he signed off on that horrible John Connor opening. But when it comes to blockbuster filmmakers, there really is nobody else like James Cameron. He really is in his own league. Not just he is creatively and technologically, and I think that's what leads to him being in his own league box office-wise. And everyone is very excited to see what he comes up with next. I mean, it's amazing. All right, so those are my top 10 most anticipated movies of 2025, good and bad. I'm excited to see your own lists down below and your thoughts on mine. Be sure to share those lists down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.